so here we are. I want to just welcome everybody to
Hello.
to this webinar, Time to Reconnect to What's Most Important. And of course, what's prompted this whole thing is the virus that we're currently experiencing. And I want to hopefully bring in some insight and some conversation so that we can, you know, just understand it more for ourselves and kind of how we need to be with it as it is present here right now and into the future. And, you know, to be able to look at this from a much more more of a meta view, okay, and more from maybe what is some of the symbolization and the metaphor that the current situation that we are in right now is bringing us, maybe asking us to look at what it is for us as individuals and what it is for us as humanity. For people who know me, you know, my background is astrology. I'm constantly looking at the themes and the just the energies that are happening. And many of you know, I always say this, I don't do any type of prediction. That's not my thing. This is not about prediction. But what I can see are the cycles that are occurring. So here's what I want to start with, okay? And again, I want you to take this in from a meta view, from a soul perspective, and take what I say not necessarily from a literal perspective as well. So what's currently occurring for us right now energetically, and this is what the astrology is telling us, is that we are in an identity crisis. And us as astrologers knew that this was going to be coming. And I have to say, for myself personally, I had no idea what this was going to look like. I thought that really the fall of the paradigms and the structures that we've had in place was going to look kind of how it had been looking, which was our government and all the conflict we were having with our government, the political parties and everything. I had no idea. I mean, I knew it was going to be big, but you know, it's like I had no idea how big it was going to get. And here we are now dealing with a situation where it's not about, you know, the political parties. It's not about race. It's not about your socioeconomic background. It's not about a particular country. It's about, you know, everybody. And so that is, you know, that's huge for us right now. So we are in a form of an identity crisis, and we're asking the question, you know, who are we? Who are we, and what do we stand for? What are our values? And how are our values being affected through this whole you know, situation that we're in right now? Because what's happening is our values, our resources are being threatened. And I'm going to get more into that to give you more context around that, to help understand that and make that more clear. And really what we're striving for here is freedom, and freedom in terms of freedom of who we are and our individuality. So it's through this, you know, through any crisis that we are in some form of transformation. And, you know, that's what that chaos brings. It brings in transformation. It brings in change. And so, as we all know, as we go through our own personal development in life, is that when we are not in alignment with who we are, what we're here to do, you know, how we're here to be, that there's going to be discourse for us. And so that's what's occurring for us collectively. You know, we're in an evolutionary change right now, and this is all part of how it's coming through for us. In my opinion, and what I see here in the astrology is part of this breakdown is us seeing the coronavirus. So since we're all, you know, we're all being affected by it, and it's all of our responsibility then to make the necessary adjustments in order for all of us to move through this as individuals and as a collective. And so what's so fascinating about this for me is, of course, I pulled up the chart of coronavirus, and where I got the date was from the first case, which was, and that's what I'm going to go over right now, which was on November 19th, 2019. And of course, this was in Wuhan, China. And what's so symbolic about this is that in November, on November 19th, that time of the month is the energy is of Scorpio. So Scorpio is the planet of death and rebirth. It is the planet of shadow, right? And so this virus came first, to our knowledge, was birthed on the first individual, at least that we have recorded, in the sign of Scorpio. So as an astrologer, let me tell you how I'm looking at this so that you can understand where I'm getting this from. So everything that is an event, you know, whether it's the event of our birth or an event of something occurring, of a marriage, there is an astrology chart that can be associated, that is associated with that. And so as an astrologer, what we do is we take those dates and times and we put the astrology to it, to read, to see, you know, what is this saying? What is the message here? So looking at this as, like I said, being birthed in the sign of Scorpio, being birthed in the sign of mystery, of things that are really, you know, that are not so much in the forefront, right? There's a lot of secretness to Scorpio energy. And so this virus is really kind of a mystery, even though they do have the origins of where they believe it was come from. But the fact that it's spreading and what it's doing is really quite a mystery to us. It really is. And the other thing about this chart that's so fascinating for me in looking at it is that the area in which it came up, the theme is in the area of our life purpose. It's in the area of how we see ourselves out in the public, how we make money, what our careers are, you know. So here it is, it's birthed in the sign of Scorpio, the sign of death and rebirth, the sign of transformation. And it has a lot of shadow energy to it. And where it is sitting in the chart is in that area of life development of, you know, what am I doing here? What's my purpose? You know, where do I belong? How do I be useful in this world, in this life? And so it's affects like how we're able to accomplish things and how we're not able to accomplish things. And so in looking at the astrology here, it's really pushing us and challenging that area of life for us of accomplishments, goals, and success. It's like that's the shadow of this, is like that's what it feels like it's doing. It's keeping us from moving forward, basically, the bottom line. That's what it is. And, you know, we know that because we feel it. And so what we've gotten down to, right, are the, like what's essential and what's non-essential in our life. That's kind of how it's even been worded for us. And so in this, what it's done, and this is what the astrology is telling me here in this chart, is that it's come here to, and I don't want you to take this in a negative way, but just kind of hear me out on this. It's kind of like imprisonment, right? So where have we kept ourselves imprisoned? And that's what it's doing. It's isolation. So the 12th house in astrology is the house of where we see our fears and our phobias. It's where we meet those. It's where those things that we have avoided, and that all of a sudden it's like we are trapped in them and we cannot avoid them, or we can avoid them, but it's difficult to avoid them. We're having to address them. And so we address them by what? Either head on, we address them by ignoring them. Many different ways to do that. We address them by distraction, right? Like get into some form of addiction. And the other fascinating thing about this is that it's calling us for isolation. And what else is calling us in this world that we've known even before all this went down is the rise of the feminine. Okay. And what is isolation? When we are asked to go inward and isolate, it is about us going inward to the feminine. So it's like there isn't a lot of masculine energy right now that's being acted and produced because it's come to a so much has come to a standstill. Okay. Yeah, I see, Brenda, you're shaking your head. So it's in very internal time. It's you know, the hermit archetype is here on deck, as well as with the other thing that's been activated for us is the victim archetype. And I think that's what I'm seeing showing up a lot in a lot of these conversations that I'm having, is that I'm seeing where depending on where you are on your life path, in your evolutionary, you know, place of consciousness, you're dealing with the victim archetype in a way that is that is at the level in which you have dealt with it in your life period. So what I'm seeing here is I'm hearing conversations of, and because I've been talking to people and I've been doing these kinds of things, these webinars and Zooms, is that I'm seeing where some people are feeling totally at the effect of this. And believe me, I know we all are at the effect of it in some way. You can't help from being just when you want to go to the grocery store. So, but how are we responding to it? Are we having a reaction to it in terms of feeling like, oh, like we're pointing the finger, or we're feeling like it's doom and gloom, or like, where are we going with it in our own internal life? Is it activating any other areas of the victim archetype that are making this even more, just even more exaggerated for us than it already is? And the fact that it's being exaggerated, and I'm not making light of it, but it's being also exaggerated by our media as well, kind of breeding more of this fear for people. So, there's I can go down that road on the road of fear, of how that is also, we're having to look at our relationship to fear, or at least hoping to look at that relationship to fear, and what is that, and how much fear are we experiencing, and taking that to say, okay, so this is animating fear inside of me, just like the victim is being animated. So, what is it that I need to address within myself that this has triggered for me? Okay. So the other thing, I'm going to go a little bit more, then I'm going to stop and ask for questions or input, that sort of thing. People want to share their insights about, what they're getting with this, with what's going on for us. So the other thing that I want to bring up is that where the astrology is for this virus is also in an area of where it's showing how we're being pulled into the underworld. And I would say that's where we're going, like that's kind of where we're at. I don't think we've gone to the bottom, and I think many people could agree. It's like we've kind of just beginning to be pulled down. And so in that pulling down, what we look at when it's like when Hades, is in the underworld, which is Greek mythology, it's like, so looking at all the shadow aspects there, and that's part of where we go in to do this transformational work, is in the underworld of our own psyche, and looking at, again, like I said earlier, the fears and the phobia that are present. And so that's where it brings in this sense of isolation. And the other thing about the astrology of this is that there is restriction. So, this chart is, what I'm saying is not just what I'm seeing, it's what this chart is telling me when I look at it. It's like there's restriction here. So we feel restricted, okay? Like we kind of can't move. There isn't a lot of wiggle room here. And so where it's also affecting us is that, as we know in the chart, it's telling us this is a social thing. This is not an individual. This is individually, yes, we're being affected, but as a whole, it's a social thing. And so because of, where the transits are currently right now, and where they're going to continue till the end of June, it's like this transit has been activated. And I'm not saying it's not going to end till the end of June, but I'm saying it's like, wow, the astrology is showing me that this period that we're in right now is going to be present until the end of June of 2020. Doesn't mean we're going to be in quarantine that long, but that this maybe this riding restriction of us being social is going to maybe be in a much more heightened state, possibly through this time period. Doesn't mean we won't go back to what we're doing, but we're going to be much more, hopefully being much more careful, having to be during this time period to the end of June. So I'm going to ask if anybody has any comments or questions right now. And if you can't unmute yourself, give me a signal and I can unmute you, but you should be able to, because I would definitely love to hear what's coming up for some of you in what I just shared so far. Does anybody have anything they want to share?
Yeah, Teresa, I wanted to ask, it's Kim over here.
Yes.
Hi, thank you. This is fascinating. And what comes up for me is that the whole idea of how that isn't it interesting that this is coming up in a time when there has been so much divisiveness, and that to me is why this makes sense, is that there's kind of this call for maybe releasing what doesn't work and moving into something different. And is that kind of what you're seeing too? Is that kind of, it's been it felt like it's like, okay, now we're going to take y'all out. Like not, I don't mean like death. I mean, just kind of like, we have to, the isolation that we're going to do, you're going to be called to do something different. And I wondered what you thought about that.
Well, you're right on, Kim. So the other thing that I did is I took this chart and I overlaid it on top of the United States. And because I really wanted to get even more, just more information from it. And so what you're saying is absolutely, along the same vein of what I'm talking about here, because this has been building to this point, right? And so if it's like, putting these two charts together is like doing a comparison of, like, let's say a relationship chart. Okay, so what's the relationship to, the virus and the United States? And so where is it hitting us in the United States? So where it's hitting us is in the house of values and resources. It's our stuff. And so, whenever I'm working with a client and I begin working with one of the first things I do is I say, we got to look at our values, right? Because if we're not aligned and living congruently with our values, then everything, all the choices that we make, if we're not coming back to what those are and we're not clear, then we're not going to be living in the congruency of, what feels aligned for us. So here we are, where our resources are being threatened, right? Our resources are being threatened, and we've been dealing with how have we been squandering our resources? Is there really global warming? There's all of this, and even our financial, right? And so of course, the irony of all this is that it's not hitting anybody. It's not about a prejudice thing here, right? This is just nobody can escape this potentially, right? So it becomes the equalizer. And so, like, we all know this is going through our own stuff. Like, life is going to say, okay, we're going to equalize this, and we're going to kind of bring you guys to your knees. We're going to bring you to our knees until you figure out and make these different choices of how you've been doing life. Does that help? Kim, does that validate?
It does. And so but then what about the overlay of the world? Like, it's not just, it's interesting to me what I thought of as you said that is the issue of consumerism, and that we are all called now to not be consumers in the same way. And I find that interesting, and that's kind of a part of what I got from you. But then that overlay of the virus in the United States, but then we also have the world on top of it.
Right. So speaking to the first thing you said about the consumerism, so the shadow of the United States is the hedonist archetype, because we can be hedonists, right? We're going to supersize it. Bigger is better. That's part of our thing. But so then we take it then to the world global level. So what we're moving into Aquarian energy. Okay, we're not there. We're slowly moving into it. And so Aquarian energy is about humanitarianism. So it goes beyond the borders. It goes beyond, what we feel that, like, us having to be the most powerful country in the world. And, so it goes beyond all of that. It's like, so how do we become like universal citizens instead of just us, them, they? Go ahead, Brenda.
Just another thing that I was just thinking about when you said that values and stuff right now from the political perspective, the whole big thing is about the market. Mm-hmm. And just yesterday, or was it the day before, I don't even remember, where the president is saying, oh yes, by Easter, we expect everybody to be in church, everybody being together. And then you have the CDC saying, no. And the whole concern is the market and the whole finance, that whole thing about, okay, we're not looking at necessarily from a humanitarian perspective. It's all about the almighty dollar.
Right.
That just so clear, so blatant.
Yeah, so that's our value system, right? Like, because that's what, and that's what's that's what I think has brought such a divide for us as a country, is that when we look at some of the opposing, views, it's like, so what do you value? Do you value, the ego, or do you value really the soul? And so, of course, we don't speak in those terms, universally as far as the culture, but those of us who are in this, in this realm of how we see life, it's like basically that's kind of what we're coming to, because it's like through, if we think about, the United States or the world as as an entity in itself, just like an individual is an entity. And so, like, in order to raise the vibration of ourself, let alone a country, like, it's about soul infusion. Like, how do we bring more soul to, the world, our life, what we do, our relationships? And, I'm kind of hopping all over here now, but because things are just popping in. The other thing too is, in this time of isolation, we're having to connect differently. So we're having to, it's like we've been cut off from ways in which we normally connect. And so now it's like it's going into our more internal resources of connecting in ways like what we're doing right now, like all of us on this Zoom call. We're still having connection here. So there's, that aspect of how we need to even disconnect to connect again differently. And what becomes really important for us, again, going back to our values, and that also, which translates to our mindset. How do we think? What do we believe? Right? And we can go down the road of religion, but I won't, because that's a big whole other can of worms. But it's all of these things are being activated right now. There's so much going on. And when I was doing this, going through this chart, I got emotional when I got to this one point in the chart, and it was Venus. Venus is the lover of the chart. And where Venus is where we want to grow and cultivate love. And the Venus in this virus chart is in the 10th house, the 11th house. And the 11th house is the social house. It's the house of how we connect with everybody all over the world. It's not just community, it's all over. And so I believe that my emotion that came up was the sadness of, number one, of how we're being quarantined. And yet at the same time, it's the birth of the connection in a much more loving, unconditional way with not just who we can relate to, but to even others who are different than what we are. Because one of the things that is important here to remember is that we become more connected through our individuality, which is totally the opposite of how it used to be, how we were set up. It was more like we all are in our groups and we're segregated, and that's what makes us feel safe and comfortable. And so that actually is part of this dismantling here, because we have the energy of the rebel archetype coming in and saying, no way, the status quo is cracking, is cracked, it's dismantling, it's falling apart. And that's what this energy is bringing. It's bringing that rebellion of, no, it's about the individuality of us that makes us more together. It's the sameness now that's keeping us separate. So it's very paradoxical in this what's transpiring here. So go ahead, Liz.
Hello?
Yep.
Am I unmuted?
You're unmuted. Go for it.
You can hear me?
Yes, I can.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm coming from a little bit different angle. My father just had to have a serious emergency surgery last Wednesday. So I don't know if we have any hospital workers on the call, but I have seen how unprepared we are and how our healthcare workers are going in. I'm in Virginia, going in to help COVID patients without the necessary gear. I mean, they only have surgical masks and yellow gowns. And so this, on top of all the chaos of personally with my father being ill, the chaos of the coronavirus, but the danger that our healthcare workers are being exposed to. And we're not a third world country, and we don't even have the N95 respirators or the white hazmat suits. And, just the enormity of not being prepared and people going in and risking their lives to help others, that's huge. But I can't help but getting really bent out of shape thinking what's gone awry and how can this even happen, and how can we expect healthcare workers to work without the proper equipment? And it's just absolute chaos. I mean, everywhere I turn. So anyways, I just wanted to throw that out and see if you had any light to shed on that with how ill-prepared we really are, and how it could, not to make everybody scared, but how it could really be way worse than anyone really knows once you get into the hospital and see what's actually going on.
Well, thanks for sharing, Liz.
Thanks.
Yeah, I'm sorry to hear about your dad too. But what I do want to speak to is that is exactly what we're saying here, is that, or that I'm saying here, is that's part of the infrastructure of what is not properly put in place, right? And so the unfortunate part about it is that, we can't necessarily fix something immediately that is so somewhat broken. So we've got to obviously do the best that we can. And I don't know if there are any health workers on here, but I did speak to one of my clients earlier who is a health worker. And one of the things and she's having to be in a situation with what's going on. And she said, she says, the percentage of this and me, dying is like 2%. She says, I'm not afraid of dying. She goes, and the potential is that, if I were to get it, that I would be just fine, eventually, that I would be okay. And I know there's people, because she's not a high risk person. I just want to say that it's really important to be careful not to go down a road of catastrophizing this to a point to where we feel victimized by it, because that's the other thing that's coming up here, is the victim archetype. And so if we go into that, then we start going into blame. And of course there's accountability, but that's part of what we're experiencing here, is where do we need to hold ourselves accountable to make these changes in our, in the structures that we have had set up. And the astrology of this has been that this is the dismantling, this is the fall of structures that are not put in place that support where it is that we're moving toward. So the breakdown of these things, in some ways, Liz, is necessary for us in order to know what we need to change. And that's unfortunately the sacrifices that happen during these type of catastrophic things, is that, we lose people are struggle. And, so how we frame this in our head is so important for us. That is so important to whether we feel at the effect of this, or we're doing things to help support the changes that need to happen.
Yeah. And Teresa?
Yes, Brenda.
I don't want to sound like I'm uncaring or anything like that, but it's also that kind of the thing where I don't want to put my energy there, because what you put your energy to in, you bring forward more. So I'm personally trying not to think negatively about it so much, but still take all my precautions. But the other thing I wanted to say was earlier, and I'm not sure everything you said about it, but about it being in a feminine energy. And I think we've lived so long in masculine energy that I'm just talking about just the whole way we do everything. And now we're more, if we're in a feminine energy, it's more in a receptive mode. but I'm not really sure how to connect all of this.
Okay. Well, thank you for the comment, Brenda. JG, I don't know if you want to say something. I'm going to get to you in just a second, though. I just want to comment on Brenda really quick here, because you said something like you're not trying to act like, you're not acting like you don't care, but you're not trying to, put a lot of energy into it. And I understand that. I was saying earlier to someone in a conversation today that, think about the universal law of attraction, right? So the thing is this is a big energy. So we cannot help, again, I'm repeating myself, to be affected by it in some way. So what kind of energy are we going to meet it with? Are we going to meet it with the same energy that the media is coming at us with? Because if we do, then we continue to grow this energy, right? But it doesn't mean we ignore it. It's important that we acknowledge what's going on. So how do we bring light to whatever it is in our environment that we are being exposed to? And how we perceive things is going to make a difference. Do we see the half full, or do we see, the half empty? Okay, it's not digging your head in the sand, although that could be, but checking in with yourself to see how you're being with this. So, Christina, JG is going to go next, I think. Did you have a comment to make, JG?
Yeah, quite a bit. Thank you so much for what you're doing, first of all, Teresa. A lot of things that I've been picking up from my guides coincide with this. I'm like blown away with dates and stuff, because I've been picking that up, that this whole virus thing will abate in June, toward the end of June, right along with what you had said. The thing that I really want to bring up is that in the midst of all of this chaos, there's something very beautiful that's happening on the inside. And that's what the guides, and that's what I've been picking up in my quiet time, is a couple of things I want to hit on. Vibration. We're vibrating at a higher energy. And those of us that are not going to be on this planet, put it on Gaia, won't be able to sustain the higher energy. So we're leaving the planet. All those that are leaving, I'm not saying, that they're, that it's a good thing that they're dying. It's part of the spiritual evolutionary process of us moving into more light. And so we're being really looked at. When something's in your face and won't let go of you, that's when my guides say that's the time to celebrate, because it means that you're strong enough now to look at it. And that's what we have to hold on to, that in spite of what appears before us, there is something beautiful happening underneath, is that we are really shredding away this whole masculine energy of me first, or me dominant, or me, and we're moving not only to a we, but to the one. And that's what we really need to hold on to. And that's the challenge, and that's the dynamic spiritual gymnastics that I'm doing right now, is when I see Trump and all of that, my natural inclination is like, how could you? And I get caught up in that whole drama that's happening. And then that still voice is telling me this is necessary. He's in a way, this angel that's come, he's not even aware of it, believe me, but he's really an agent for change. Do we want more of this? And I think each of us is being asked, do I want more of this? And those that supported him blindly are starting to question, do I want more of this? Friends of mine are dying. There seems to be all this chaos. There seems to be all this violence. There seems to be all of this stuff. Where is the spiritualness of it? And that's what's missing. And I think that's what we're moving toward. And I love the idea of the evolutionary change. And this thing about the feminine energy, it's not only the feminine energy, it's the rebalancing of the energy on this planet that needs to happen. It's not getting rid of the male energy, but maybe feminizing that male energy, blending that more of the feminine in the male energy that leads us to more compassion, more understanding, more community. And I find that the irony is, in our isolation, we're becoming a community again. We're seeking like-minded people to be with and find ways of face-to-face. This is the new electronic face-to-face. Instead of being glued to our iPhones and our technology and not dialoguing with each other, we're actually opening our hearts. And so I'm kind of like excited to know that I'm part of this change, and part of my evolutionary process is, can I hold that space and know that behind the scene that I'm doing great work as a soul, and you're doing great work, and we're all doing great work as a soul. And so we've got to hold the vision together of something emerging that's beautiful. What do we want for this planet?
Absolutely.
You know, and that's the energy that I'm feeling compelled to tell people, put that energy out, because just like you said, what you focus on will materialize. And, you know, and that old adage, you know, I hate war, will only bring the energy of hate, you know. So we've got to change it to say, I love peace. And that's the energy of love. So we need to hold on to that I love, and name all the things that we want to have and hold on to it. And when I see Trump and I see all of this happening, that's what's being shredded away. And I have to bless it and say, okay, it's not going to last. It's not going to last. What do I want to replace? You know, what do I want to envision for? What do I want my grandkids to hold on to? I don't want them to hold on to doom and gloom. I want them to hold on to an idea that they can have a better world, or that they're part of, that they're agents for change, for something beautiful. So that's all I got to say. Did you freeze up? Yeah, I think she's frozen. Hello?
I'll go if you can hear me.
I think Teresa is like frozen.
Yeah.
She's gone. What did I do?
That was good, JG.
Yes. Yeah, and I agree with both of what both of you were saying. You know, I think this is to blow up where we have been, and for us to see, right, ourselves as community. And to do that is we first have to bring ourselves into ourselves by isolating ourselves, you know, and that it's also breaking down the barriers of haves and have-nots, you know, racial, ethnic, religious, all the barriers we put up to separate ourselves. This is a common enemy in which we can all gather in. And I think too, from what you were saying as well, what I got was my daughter's turning 22 next month. And one thing I notice about her and many of her contemporaries who maybe are up to like 5 years older is the sense of community globally. They're concerned about what's happening to others, and that they have a humanitarian aspect to their life work. And I just really like what I'm seeing and coming with these young people who are born like around 95 and later, and just that they don't have the hang-ups that maybe we did. I like to think that I've gotten rid of most of mine, you know, about our differences, but they look at us as wholes, and that we're all together. Right. And so I kind of see this is all happening, you know, to blow up what we had in order for these new people to come with your idea of community and breaking down all these barriers.
Yes.
There's so much good happening in the world.
Yeah.
That we're not getting. There's more good happening than bad.
Mm-hmm.
I really believe that.
And so, you know, speaking to both of you said, I'm going to go ahead and mute again so we don't hear a bunch of background. There we go. Is that, you know, the Aquarian Age brings even more the mystical universal truth of all is one, right? And so that's what we're moving toward. That's what we're hoping to, bring in more of this consciousness that all is one. And in speaking to about the younger generation, the millennial, I'm going to just use that generation, is, they want things, some things like medicine to be socialized. Many of them do, because in that way we're taking care of everybody. And it's the old paradigm of socialization of like communists, or how things have been viewed before, that brings fear in. Is like, oh, then like all of a sudden, that feeling of that we're not going to get our needs met in that way because we're taking care of everybody, is the overriding fear, because that's how it was that way at one point, where it's like either you have it or you don't. So, this is a, it's even deeper than a mindset. I mean, these are belief systems. Our belief systems are being challenged. And as all of you know, that when we are hit with some type of catastrophic thing and our
think we lost her again.
invincible, or feeling that we are. And so what a humbling experience, this is on some level for us. And, the archetypal wound for us, as is what, not necessarily as United States, but just as what this virus brings, is in the archetypal wound of our resources and value. That's what the coronavirus chart is saying. That's where the wound is in our values and our resources. Like, that's what's skewed here for us. So it's like the astrology of this keeps repeating itself, right? It's like, it's no matter what direction I look, I'm getting the same messages, just from a different, viewpoint, but it's all the same messages, everything that, even what's been commented here today. So anybody else want to say anything before I kind of move us, like, so then let's go next to like, how do we move ourselves forward? So anybody want to say anything before I move forward? Nope, we're good. Okay. So what I want to ask is this causing, is there anywhere in your life right now, like what's being animated for you right now in your life, where maybe there's potential suffering? And where, what I mean by suffering is where there's a potential, a fear coming up for you in this time. And, we can have the viewpoints of the bigger picture, which we do. And then we come in sometimes to just the human experience of it. And then that's where, things can feel a little bit more challenging. So that's what I'd like. I'm curious to know about that. If anybody wants to comment on that, if they're having those feelings at all. Or not.
Could you explain that a little bit more?
Yeah, so in this time of where you're at right now, let's say, JG, in your life, is there a place where you can maybe feel a wobble about your sense of security, and how this could feel threatening or challenging for you in any particular way?
Oh my goodness, yeah. On so many levels, physically especially, I don't know if you know, I have been diagnosed with bladder cancer. And so this virus, I have to be especially careful because I'm getting ready to do treatments starting Thursday, tomorrow. And so my immune system is heavily compromised, and so there's this fear of like, well, if I get it, will I survive it? My doctors seem to think I'll do fine because my nutrition's up and I eat healthy, and my spirituality, I have a very strong belief there. But what's coming up for me, the last thing during meditation, and this is just me personally, is the 7-year cycle. Like every 7 years, we're supposedly renewed, and I kept asking, well, what is the, quote, blessing in me getting this bladder cancer? What is the blessing of this virus if I get it? What's going on? And I got something that floated in, and it says, take a look. I had cancer many, many years ago. It says, take a look at where you were in your cycle when you first had cancer, and look at where you are in your cycle now, and you will see that you were ending your cycle. And when you ended it at 56, you were being exploded into a more spiritual realm. And that's when I really started doing more readings, and I contacted my guides and all of the above. And so I'm saying, well, how does that affect me now? Well, I'm 76. So I'm in the cycle again. You know, I'm revisiting this for some spiritual reason, or something that's going to happen that's going to catapult me for the good. So it shifted me a little bit into, like, I'm kind of excited now to find out, well, where I'm going to go. Before, I could not understand the blessing, but obviously there's one there. And the only reason I mentioned that is that there's always something good happening for, I think, each of us. That's my belief. God is always moving me toward my good. Whether I go kicking or screaming, I'm always being moved toward my good. You know, it's always there.
Yeah.
And so that's what I'm dealing with.
Yeah.
And having family worried about me, and yet I'm not worried. I'm not worried in the least. But just having the juxtaposition of me having the cancer and the virus and all of the above. And for me, it's the shedding of letting go of, well, you know, from the readings I've had with you.
Yeah. So so what I'm getting to is like faith being challenged here, right? Because I have, I mean, because me personally, it's like I don't have this big fear, but there's this fear present, sure, because it's the reality of our situation. And so where's my faith? How's my faith going to lead me through this? You know, and so then I get to look at that and to question it at times, because that's what we do, and that's a normal thing to do and a healthy thing to do, is to, reflect, do that self-reflection. So thank you for sharing that, JG. So, I do want to, we have about, I don't know, what is it? A little less than 15 minutes. So I want to open it up for any questions, of course, and that's what I've been asking, is just general questions to anything that you might want to know more specifically about in the chart. But I'm going to go ahead and just, unmute yourself if you have something that you want to share. Louise, I see somebody.
Hi. Can you hear me?
I can.
Great. Hi. Thanks so much for all of this. Through this discussion, what occurred to me is a question came up with our millennials and our young people stepping up in record numbers to vote in the upcoming election. Is there a correlation between what we're seeing in the media with Trump attacking journalists on camera, on live camera, really going to have an impact on what we see in the elections in November?
Mm-hmm. So, I've done his chart. I did a thing on his chart a while back, a couple weeks ago. And, I mean, he's definitely having, there's a lot of pressure on him in his chart. I'm seeing the astrology in that. And it's kind of like, there's a little bit of a like an unraveling that we're starting to even see more, because things are feeling out of control. So, as far as, the election, that sort of thing, and what you just spoke about, as far as the correlation, I just kind of see more of shadow being brought, it's like we can only hide our shadow, for so long, and at least if we're feeling pressure, and then it starts to leak out, right? And so that's what I'm seeing. I've seen what you've seen. So that's kind of where I'm going with this. And this is what this virus is doing. It's putting pressure. There's a lot of pressure here. So things are going to pop under pressure. It can't help from it. Did that help out, Louise?
Yes, thanks so much.
Yeah, you're welcome. You're welcome. So,
Teresa.
Yeah, go for it.
Can you speak more about the younger souls that are coming in? Are you seeing anything in the chart that's showing?
Right.
I don't even know what we call them. We can't call them millennials. They're
Right.
Gen X, Y, Z,
Right.
and whatever. You know,
Well, I
what do you
think
see happening there?
I think what's interesting about the young people that are coming in, and even younger, I'm gonna go as
I'm
young
talking
as,
about real young kids.
oh, that's where I'm going.
Yeah.
So imagine what they're seeing, and I don't mean this necessarily in a negative way, but what they're seeing is they're seeing that women can run for president. They are seeing things that we never saw in our growing up. You know, and so even though we are not seeing maybe the changes that we want to see, they're seeing things that we haven't seen. So they're seeing possibility that we never even conceived as possibility.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's very exciting to see a 5-year-old, you know, seeing that we have, you know, 3-4 women running for president. You know, they don't know the history like we know the history. So it's those types of things that I feel can bring hope and promise. And really, you know, we probably won't see it, but they are the change, you know, and the younger generation, they know that. Just like with us when we were younger, we were the change. So this Aquarian age that I'm talking about, hang on one sec, Christina. This Aquarian age that I'm talked about, I want to give a little bit of some context to how this is determined in time. So right now we're in a Capricorn age. And this Capricorn age began back in 2008. And that was when Obama was elected into office. And so what Capricorn brings in this age of the Plutonian age is when Pluto is part of the picture, it's always we're blowing up some kind of a structure. It's not a dismantling, it's really a blowing up. And we blew something up by electing an African-American president. We did, right? We all know that. So that was huge. That was a big paradigm shift. Okay, so here we've been in this time period for all this time. And so as we come into 2004 and we come into the actual Aquarian age, the age of Aquarius, just like Fifth Dimension saying, this is about the social, the humanitarian aspect. And so, you know, what structure, what's going to need to be, you know, annihilated in order to bring in the social changes that we want to bring. Well, that's what we're on the precipice of, right? Because we're in 2020. So that's the energy that we're moving into as we continue to move forward. So that's why there's so much upheaval right now. And the other thing is that the planet Pluto itself, where it presently is in the same place 4 years prior to when the to when we signed the Declaration of Independence. So that in itself says that's such a big, you know, metaphor right there, that we are in this social change. We're trying to figure this out. And we are, just like writing the Constitution of the United States, we are trying to reestablish some values here. And you know, the old paradigm wants to keep us in that old context of what those values were, and those served us at that time, but they don't completely serve us now as we move into this, you know, 240 something years later. Come on, people, you know, things have changed. Let's move with evolution here. Christina, you had your hand up. There, I don't know, I can't unmute you. You have to unmute yourself. Okay, there she goes.
Yeah, well, I was just signaling it's Generation Z, you know, who were born like 95 and on. And that's what I was talking about, my daughter's generation, that, you know, in being around them, they're very much into social justice, human rights. They don't like what's happening. My daughter's a huge supporter of Bernie Sanders. You know, she likes what he stands for and that he had integrity throughout his life. And so that's what I see is, I'm hopeful for this generation, you know, that her generation is coming with these, that break down our barriers that we've been living with. And especially over the last 10 years, people have been putting up, dividing us by the way we look, the way we think, by who we are, where we live. And I think we've missed the point of that we're more alike and we all want the same thing.
Right, I agree. Yeah, and you know, I think that also that you know, it's divine timing. It's the time that has come upon us of where we're at right now. I'm gonna unmute somebody here. There we go. Mute. There we go. There we go. Okay. Yeah. So you know, I mean, but I also think that we can't rely on the younger generation to do our work for us either. You know, I think it's up to us to do the work right now. Oh, I gotta mute somebody.
On top of that is, who are the parents of these children? You know, my daughter has witnessed, you know, as you were saying, Obama becoming president, women running for office, knowing that there's possibility for her. And I believe that her father and I were an instrument of that change. We had these views when she was born, and she was brought up in them. And I think a lot of this children that are coming of age now, that's what they're, you know, if their parents are enlightened, that's what they've brought them into. And I hope that they're the ones that can really act and take and really move us forward.
Yeah, agree. Yeah. Thank you. Okay, so here we come to close to the end of our time. If anybody has any questions or comments, please do it. We're coming into the close. And as I'm waiting for that, okay, sure, go for it, Sharon. I'm going to unmute you.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, you know, we've been focusing a lot on the global view, the view of the United States, and I'd like to bring it to each of us individually, because each and every one of us wouldn't be on this screen if we didn't suspect or have a practice of raising our vibration. And I truly believe that it's really a time for me and those of us that I've spoken to really begin to honor those things that we believe to be our personal truths. And so no matter what you hear externally, holding on to your personal beliefs really helps to amplify your light and your vibration. I know a lot of people have been talking about being in fear, but I have to tell you, I'm in joy. And I'm in joy because I've been waiting a long time for this to happen. And this is the only way that humanity can globally change, because we've lived many centuries, eons of violence and oppression, and this is the only way for all of us to begin to look at life from a different perspective. And so I don't know, I'm just kind of reaching out to all of you to say, yeah, stay in your truth. Be neutral with what you see, and however you can visualize being grounded in your own light, that's what's going to help amplify to get us over to the next place, wherever that may be. That's it.
Thank you, Sharon. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. All right, everybody. You know, in closing, I think that was a great way to segue there to close it out, Sharon. Thank you very much for kind of bringing that in. And yeah, I want to close with saying that it is it is just to encourage everybody to hold as much light as possible in this time right now, and that you know, it's, you know, the energy that we are running, the challenges maybe that we feel, to know that those are all part of our individual growth and learning at this time. And, you know, our faith is being challenged on some level for some of us. You know, some of us are maybe not working right now, you know, that are on this call right now, and they're not quite sure. There's some uncertainty there. And, you know, there's this book by Pema Chodron, and said this before a couple days ago. It's like the book is being comfortable with uncertainty. And that's what we're being asked to be right now, is to be comfortable with uncertainty. And in doing so is how we let go of control, and how we take ourselves out of suffering, of the cycle of suffering in our life, and that we learn to work and really embrace that victim archetype to where we're no longer at the effect of the victim, but we are aware of it. It comes, but we're not being dictated and going into reaction with it, and learning how to respond. And that we stay connected as possible in these types of ways, so that we can help serve each other and support each other. And I know for myself, as a, solopreneur, entrepreneur in business for myself, I am, I'm seeing, how would I say, marketing from, other businesses, and some of them, it's like, I'm just like, I really don't want to hear it right now. I really don't. It's not important right now. And that's why I'm doing this thing, this free thing, and going to continue to do some more, because I feel like that's what I need to do. It's my work here as a light worker, and all you luminaries on here. It's like, how do we serve? Because in the service of this is when that's prosperity. That's how this is how we shift this consciousness. So I'm going to hear from one other person, and that is Samantha Leonard, because I love what Samantha usually has to say. Of course, not usually, but she always has something cool to say. So there you go, Samantha. I'm giving you the floor.
Okay, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, perfectly.
Okay, great. I just would like to kind of go on the back of Sharon and yourself and say that I almost feel like all the work I've been doing in the last 5 to 10 years has prepared me for this time, right? Like that we've all been trying to manage stress, anxiety, enlightenment, go inside, right? And I just feel like this is my opportunity to bring positivity and love to everyone around me, anyone I interact with. Like, I just feel like when I say hello and how are you, like sometimes people, even though you're trying to distance yourself walking, but like it's almost like oxygen to the other person. Like they just light up, because so many people are in such fear. And it doesn't take, for me, like I'm shocked at how little it takes for me to feel safe and to feel like I know it's going to be better. Just like Sharon said, I feel like this is what has to happen for all of us to come together, to consider and care for one another, that we are the human race. It's like, I think we're like Sharon said, and you've said, we're all on here because we have this shared collective feeling. Yeah. And I'm really excited about what the world is going to look like after this. I really am. So thank you for everybody.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay. All right, everybody. I really appreciate you guys coming on and sharing this time with me. And I am going to be, this is being recorded. I'm going to stop the recording right now. And this is being recorded.